Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this emotional journey of unexpected love and second chances, don't forget to like this story and drop a comment below telling me what you think will happen next. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now let's dive into Richard and Sarah's life-changing encounter. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse floor at 3 p.m. instead of the usual 9 p.m., and Richard Morgan loosened his tie with an exhausted sigh. The merger deal had collapsed spectacularly, but for once he didn't care about the millions lost. 2 years since Emily's death, and the numbers still felt meaningless. His daughter's laughter used to echo through these marble halls, her tiny feet racing across the imported Italian floors. Now only silence greeted him. Richard dropped his briefcase by the entrance, noting absently that his housekeeper had already left for the day. The afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated dust particles dancing in the air, something Mrs. Patterson would never allow. He frowned, heading toward the kitchen for the bourbon that had become his most faithful companion. Then he heard it, a small cough, delicate and muffled, coming from the second floor. His heart hammered against his ribs. Burglars didn't cough. His hand instinctively reached for his phone, finger hovering over 911, as he climbed the stairs with practiced silence. The sound came from Emily's room, the shrine he'd preserved exactly as she'd left it 2 years ago. Pink walls, stuffed animals arranged precisely on shelves, her favorite unicorn comforter still on the bed. Richard pushed the door open slowly, and his breath caught in his throat. A little girl, no more than 5 or 6 years old, lay curled under Emily's unicorn blanket. Her clothes were threadbare, patched in multiple places, and her shoes, worn sneakers with holes at the toes, sat neatly by the bed, as if she'd been taught to respect other people's homes. Dark circles shadowed her closed eyes, and her chest rose and fell with labored breaths that made Richard's medical instincts flare with alarm. She looked so much like Emily at that age that his knees nearly buckled. "What the hell?" he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The child's eyes fluttered open, brilliant blue, just like Emily's had been, and widened with terror. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she gasped, scrambling backward against the headboard. "Please don't hurt me. Mommy said the heating would work here, and I was so cold and I couldn't breathe and—" Hey, Richard said, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. He hadn't used that tone since Emily died. "I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "Lily Miller. Are you going to call the police? Mommy will be so scared." Richard studied her carefully. The child was clearly malnourished, her breathing concerning, and the way she trembled suggested more than just fear. She was genuinely ill. Every instinct screamed at him to call security, to remove this intrusion from his sacred space. But something in those blue eyes stopped him cold. "Where's your mother, Lily?" "Working. She has 3 jobs. She works at the diner until 2 a.m., then cleans offices at 4 a.m., then serves lunch at the Italian place." Lily recited the schedule, as if she'd memorized it from hearing it too many times. "She doesn't know I come here. The window by the fire escape is broken, and I can climb through. I'm very quiet." "How many times have you been here?" Lily bit her lip, debating whether to answer. 17 times, she finally admitted, "but I only sleep in this room because it's warm and safe and it smells like flowers, and I pretend—" She stopped, fresh tears falling. "I pretend I have a home like this. I'm sorry, I know it's wrong." Richard felt something crack inside his chest, the first real emotion besides grief in 24 months. This child had been invading his home, sleeping in his dead daughter's bed, and he couldn't summon the anger he knew he should feel. Instead, he noticed details that made his heart ache. The way she'd carefully arranged the pillows, how she'd obviously been reading Emily's favorite book on the nightstand, the respect with which she treated everything in the room. "You're sick," he said, recognizing the symptoms he'd seen too many times during Emily's illness. "How long have you been having trouble breathing?" "I don't know, a while. Mommy says we'll go to the doctor when she saves enough money. But the heating broke last month, and now we need to fix that first because winter is coming, and Boston gets really cold and—" Another coughing fit interrupted her, this one violent enough to make her small body shake. Richard moved without thinking, sitting on the edge of the bed and placing a hand on her forehead. Fever. Definitely a fever, and the breathing pattern suggested something more serious than a simple cold. His medical training from his pre-business days kicked in, assessing, calculating, diagnosing. "Your mother," he said carefully. "What's her full name?" "Sarah Miller. She's the best mommy in the whole world, even if we don't have much money. She says love is more important than gold. Lily's voice held such pure devotion that Richard felt his throat tighten. Sarah Miller. The name triggered something in his memory, buried deep under layers of grief and anger. His wife Catherine had mentioned that name countless times during their marriage. Her best friend from medical school, the brilliant Sarah Miller, who disappeared after some scandal Richard had never fully understood. Catherine had tried to find her, had written letters that Richard discovered in her desk after the funeral. Letters he'd never mailed because he'd been too consumed by his own pain to care about his wife's final wishes. "Does your mother know you're sick?" Lily nodded miserably. "She cries at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. She says she's sorry she can't afford the medicine and that she failed me, and I keep telling her she's the best mommy ever, but she just cries more." The child's voice broke. "I don't want mommy to be sad. That's why I come here, to get better in the warm room so she won't worry so much." Richard stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, Boston spread out in its autumn glory, leaves turning gold and red in the common, people rushing about their insignificant problems, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had just shifted on its axis again. 2 years ago, he'd lost Emily to a rare genetic condition that no amount of money could cure. He'd thrown millions at the best doctors, the most experimental treatments, anything that might save his little girl, and he'd failed. Now here was another little girl, sick and poor, breaking into his home out of desperation, sleeping in his dead daughter's bed because she had nowhere else to go. And her mother was the woman Catherine had loved like a sister, the woman his wife had begged him to find before cancer took her voice forever. "Lily," he said, turning back to the child, "I need you to tell me exactly where you live, right now." Terror flooded her features again. "Are you calling the police? Please, I promise I'll never come back. Don't take mommy away from me." "I'm not calling the police." Richard pulled out his phone, but instead of dialing 911, he called his personal physician. "I'm getting you help, and then I'm going to have a very long conversation with your mother about why she thought breaking into a stranger's home was her daughter's only option for survival." As Dr. Harrison's voice came through the line, Richard watched Lily's expression transform from fear to confusion to tentative hope. She clutched Emily's unicorn blanket tighter, and he noticed she'd been careful not to damage anything in the room. She was a good kid, raised by someone who'd taught her respect despite their circumstances, raised by someone who'd once been Catherine's best friend and had vanished into poverty and obscurity, for reasons Richard suddenly desperately needed to understand. After arranging for Dr. Harrison to come immediately, Richard sat down in Emily's reading chair, the same chair where he'd read bedtime stories to his daughter every night. "Tell me about your mother," he said quietly. "What does she do all day?" Lily's face lit up despite her obvious discomfort. "She's amazing. She knows everything about medicine and science, and she helps people when they're hurt, even though we don't have money for doctors ourselves. Last week she helped Mr. Chen when he cut his hand really bad at the restaurant, and she knew exactly what to do, and he said she saved his finger. And she reads to me every night, even when she's so tired she can barely keep her eyes open. And she makes pancakes on Sundays when we can afford eggs, and they're the best pancakes in the whole world, even if we don't have syrup. And she tells me about stars and planets and how big the universe is, and that our problems are small compared to infinity. But that doesn't make our love any less huge." Richard listened, his throat tight, as this sick child praised her struggling mother with such fierce love that it made his own comfortable grief feel somehow insufficient. How long had it been since he'd felt anything but hollow? Since he'd let himself care about anything beyond the empire he'd built as a distraction from Emily's empty room? "Your mother sounds like a very special person," he managed. "She is. She used to be a doctor, she told me once when I asked why she knew so much about medicine. But something bad happened, and now she just works regular jobs. She won't tell me what happened, but sometimes she gets really sad when she looks at her old medical books, and I hear her crying in the bathroom." A doctor. Catherine had said Sarah was going to be one of the best pediatric surgeons in the country. What kind of scandal could destroy a career that promising? And why had Catherine never been able to find her friend after it happened? The doorbell rang, Dr. Harrison arriving with his usual efficiency. Richard stood, looking down at Lily, who watched him with those heartbreaking blue eyes that reminded him so much of Emily that it physically hurt. "I'm going to help you, Lily," he said, and was surprised to realize he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Whatever you need, whatever your mother needs, I'm going to make sure you get better." "Why?" Lily asked simply. "You don't know us." Richard glanced around Emily's room, the shrine he'd maintained for 2 years, unable to let go, unable to move forward, trapped in a grief so consuming it had hollowed him out from the inside. This little girl had been seeking warmth and safety in the one room that represented all his pain and loss. And instead of desecrating it, she treated it with reverence as if she understood the sacred nature of the space. "Because someone should have helped my daughter," he said quietly, "and no one could. Maybe I can help you instead, as doctor." Harrison examined Lily, asking gentle questions about her symptoms. Richard texted his assistant to cancel all his afternoon meetings. Then he sent another text to his head of security, requesting Sarah Miller's current address and employment information. Whatever happened next, whatever confrontation awaited him with this woman who'd once meant so much to Catherine, he needed to understand the full picture, because something told him that finding Lily in Emily's bed wasn't random chance. It was the universe giving him a second chance at something he'd failed at the first time, the chance to save a little girl's life, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to finally live again instead of merely existing in the hollow shell of his former life. Sarah Miller's feet screamed in protest as she climbed the 4 flights of stairs to the apartment she couldn't even call home without feeling like a liar. Home implied warmth, safety, comfort, all things the crumbling building in Dorchester decidedly lacked. The hallway reeked of mildew and something she preferred not to identify, and the flickering fluorescent light cast shadows that made the peeling wallpaper look even more depressing. She'd been up for 19 hours straight, her shift at Marco's Italian kitchen running long, because someone had called in sick, and Marco knew Sarah would never say no to extra hours. Extra hours meant an extra $20, and extra $20 meant she could buy Lily those antibiotics the free clinic had prescribed last week. Never mind that the antibiotics wouldn't actually help. Sarah knew enough from her abandoned medical career to recognize that Lily's symptoms pointed to something far more serious than a simple respiratory infection, but she couldn't afford the tests that would confirm her worst fears. So she smiled, served pasta, collected tips, and pretended that hope and determination could somehow substitute for actual medical care. Sarah fumbled with her keys at the door marked 4C, dreading the cold that would hit her the moment she stepped inside. The landlord had promised to fix the heating next week for the past 6 weeks, and winter was approaching fast. She'd already started sleeping in all her clothes, huddled under every blanket they owned, praying Lily stayed healthy enough to make it through another Massachusetts winter. The door swung open to reveal an empty apartment. "Lily?" Sarah called, her heart immediately jumping into her throat. The worn couch where she'd left her daughter that morning sat abandoned, the blanket tossed aside. "Baby, where are you?" Panic rising, Sarah rushed through the tiny 2-room apartment. Lily wasn't in their shared bedroom, wasn't in the bathroom that was barely bigger than a closet. The window was closed and locked. Sarah always triple-checked that before leaving. Where could a 6-year-old go? Unless she'd gone to that place again. "No," Sarah breathed, her worst fear confirmed when she noticed Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit still sitting on the couch. Her daughter never went anywhere without Mr. Hoppy, unless she was going somewhere she knew she shouldn't, somewhere she was deliberately hiding from her mother, the Morgan penthouse. The forbidden sanctuary Lily had confessed to visiting 3 weeks ago after Sarah found mud on her daughter's shoes that could only have come from the expensive planters in the lobby of the luxury high-rise 6 blocks away. Sarah had been horrified, had lectured Lily about trespassing and danger, and how they could both end up in jail. Lily had cried, had promised to never do it again, had explained through sobs that she'd only wanted to be warm for a little while, and Sarah, desperate and exhausted and drowning in medical bills she couldn't pay, had believed her. "Stupid, stupid, stupid," Sarah muttered, grabbing her jacket and racing back down the stairs. She ran the 6 blocks at a pace that made her lungs burn and her vision blur, arriving at the Morgan Tower with her heart hammering against her ribs. The doorman, a stern-faced man named George, who'd chased her away twice before, blocked her path before she could reach the elevator. "Ma'am, I've told you before, residents only." "My daughter is upstairs," Sarah gasped, fighting the urge to physically shove past him. "She's 6 years old, sick, and she broke into one of the apartments. I need to get her now before the police are called." George's expression shifted from irritation to concern. "Mr. Morgan's penthouse?" "Yes," Sarah admitted, shame and fear warring in her chest. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know she was still going there. I thought I'd stopped her." "Mr. Morgan called down an hour ago," George interrupted. "Said to send you up immediately when you arrived. He's been waiting for you." The blood drained from Sarah's face. Richard Morgan. She knew that name. Everyone in Boston knew that name. venture capitalist, real estate magnate, founder of Morgan Industries with a net worth that made the Forbes list. Catherine Morgan's husband, though Catherine had died 2 years ago from cancer that had taken her far too young. Catherine, who'd been Sarah's best friend in medical school before everything fell apart. Catherine, who'd tried to find Sarah after the scandal destroyed her career and reputation. Catherine, whose letters had arrived at Sarah's last known address, but had never reached her because Sarah had already disappeared into the poverty and anonymity that became her refuge. "He knows," Sarah whispered, more to herself than George. "He knows who I am. I don't know about that, ma'am, but he specifically said you weren't in trouble." His exact words were, "Send Mrs. Miller up with courtesy and respect when she arrives. So if you'll just follow me to the elevator." Sarah followed numbly, her mind racing through scenarios. How much did Richard Morgan know? Had Lily told him Sarah's history? Did he remember Catherine mentioning her friend from medical school? More importantly, what had he done with Lily? Was her daughter terrified, traumatized, sitting in a police station somewhere while Sarah had been serving linguine to tourists? The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like it lasted hours. When the doors finally opened directly into the Morgan apartment, Sarah stepped into a space so luxurious it made her want to weep. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than Sarah had earned in the past 5 years combined. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston spread out below like a glittering promise of everything Sarah had lost. Mrs. Miller. She turned to find a man who took her breath away despite the circumstances. Richard Morgan stood in the doorway of what appeared to be a home office, tall and commanding, in an obviously expensive suit, with the tie loosened and top button undone. Dark hair showed hints of grey at the temples, and his face bore the kind of handsome maturity that came with age and grief. But it was his eyes that struck her most. Deep brown, intelligent, and currently studying her with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously run away and stand taller. "Where's Lily?" Sarah demanded, fear overpowering any intimidation. "What did you do with my daughter?" "Your daughter is sleeping in my guest room under the supervision of Dr. Harrison, my personal physician." Richard's voice was measured, controlled, revealing nothing. "She's been examined, medicated for her immediate symptoms, and will need extensive follow-up care that we'll discuss shortly." "You had no right—" "I had every right," Richard interrupted, his tone hardening. "Your daughter broke into my home 17 times, Mrs. Miller. 17 separate instances of criminal trespass that I could report to the authorities. The only reason I haven't is because she's a sick child, whose mother apparently thought letting her illegally enter a stranger's apartment was preferable to finding legitimate help." The words hit like physical blows, each one true and devastating. Sarah felt tears burn behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough over the past 3 years, cried when she'd lost her medical license, cried when her savings ran out, cried when she'd realized Lily was developing the same symptoms she'd seen in too many dying children during her residency. She wouldn't cry in front of this man who looked at her with such obvious disdain. "I'm sorry," she said, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. "I didn't know she was still coming here. I'll make sure it never happens again. Now please, let me take my daughter home." "Home?" Richard's laugh was bitter. "To the freezing apartment with broken heating that you can't afford to fix? To the building where the mold is so thick I could smell it on Lily's clothes? That home, Mrs. Miller?" "It's all I have," Sarah shot back, anger finally breaking through her fear. "Some of us don't have penthouse apartments and personal physicians on call. Some of us are just trying to survive. Some of us also don't let our children break into other people's homes instead of asking for help." "I didn't know where else to turn." The confession exploded out of her before she could stop it. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your child get sicker every day and know you can't help her? To have all the medical knowledge in the world trapped in your head but no license to use it, no money to pay for care, no options except watching her deteriorate and praying for a miracle?" Richard's expression shifted slightly, something like recognition flickering in his eyes. "You're a doctor." "I was a doctor," Sarah corrected bitterly. Past tense. "I lost my license 3 years ago after a malpractice suit that destroyed my career, my reputation, and my life. Now I'm a waitress who can barely afford to feed her daughter, let alone provide medical care. So yes, I made the terrible decision to let Lily find warmth in a stranger's home. Judge me all you want, I judge myself every single day." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Richard studied her with those penetrating brown eyes, and Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze. She'd lost everything, her career, her dignity, her future. But she still had her pride. She wouldn't cower before this man, no matter how much power he held over her and Lily's fate. "Catherine talked about you," Richard finally said, his voice softer. "Her brilliant friend Sarah, who was going to revolutionize pediatric surgery. She tried to find you after whatever happened. She wrote you letters." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. "Catherine wrote to me. Dozens of them. I found them in her desk after the funeral." Richard's jaw tightened. "I never mailed them. I was too angry, too consumed by grief. I blamed the entire world for Emily's death, including Catherine's old friends, who'd somehow failed to be there when she needed them most." "Emily?" Sarah whispered, though she already knew. The room Lily had described in such loving detail, the pink walls and stuffed animals and unicorn blanket, it wasn't a guest room, it was a shrine. "My daughter. She died 2 years ago from a genetic condition that no amount of money or medical expertise could cure. She was 8 years old, loved unicorns and fairy tales, and had the same blue eyes your daughter has." Richard turned away, his shoulders rigid. "Your daughter has been sleeping in Emily's bed, Mrs. Miller, breaking into my dead child's room and finding comfort there, while I've preserved it like a museum to my failure." The raw pain in his voice hit Sarah like a wave. This wasn't just an angry rich man confronting a trespasser. This was a grieving father who'd found another little girl in his daughter's sacred space. No wonder he hadn't immediately called the police. No wonder he'd called a doctor first. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said quietly. "About Emily, about Catherine, about everything. I didn't know. I would never have let Lily—" "Come with me." Richard walked toward a hallway and Sarah followed on shaking legs. He opened a door to reveal a guest bedroom where Lily slept peacefully under pristine white covers, her breathing easier than it had been in weeks. An older man in a suit, presumably Dr. Harrison, sat in a chair nearby monitoring her with professional attention. "Your daughter has stage 2 restrictive lung disease," Dr. Harrison said without preamble. "Same condition that killed Mr. Morgan's daughter. Without proper treatment, she'll be dead within 2 years. With treatment, she has an 80% chance of survival." The world tilted sideways. Sarah gripped the doorframe, her worst fears confirmed by clinical diagnosis. "I don't have insurance. I can't afford—" "I'm paying for it," Richard interrupted. "All of it. The tests, the treatment, everything she needs." Sarah's head snapped toward him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I couldn't save Emily, but I can save Lily." Richard's expression was unreadable. "Because Catherine would have wanted me to help her best friend's daughter. Because I'm tired of living in a mausoleum of grief, and maybe saving your child will help me remember what it felt like to care about something again. I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," Richard said sharply. "It's payment for services rendered." Sarah blinked in confusion. "What services?" "I'm hiring you, Mrs. Miller. You have medical knowledge but no license. I have money but no one I trust to help manage Emily's foundation, which funds research into pediatric lung diseases. You'll work for me, help run the foundation, use your expertise to evaluate research proposals and grant applications. In exchange, Lily gets the treatment she needs, and you both get to move into a proper apartment with heating that actually works." It was too much, too generous, too sudden, too good to be true. Sarah's instincts screamed that there had to be a catch, some terrible price she'd pay for accepting help from a man who looked at her with such complicated emotions. But Lily stirred in the bed, coughing softly, and Sarah's maternal instinct overpowered every other consideration. Her daughter was dying. This man was offering to save her. What choice did Sarah really have? "There's more to this," she said carefully. "You don't offer strangers 6-figure jobs and free medical care without expecting something in return." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm a businessman, Mrs. Miller. I always expect returns on my investments. Right now my return is seeing Lily get healthy and watching you put your medical knowledge to good use again. Later," he shrugged, "we'll see. Maybe you'll help us make a breakthrough that saves other children. Maybe you'll simply be a competent employee. Or maybe—" He trailed off, his gaze holding hers in a way that made her pulse quicken despite everything. There was something in his eyes beyond grief and business calculation, something that looked almost like the beginning of hope, or recognition, or possibility. "Maybe what?" Sarah pressed. "Maybe we both need to learn how to live again instead of just surviving," Richard said quietly. "Your daughter broke into my dead child's room looking for warmth, and somehow in the process, she might have broken through the ice I've been living in for 2 years. That's worth more than money, Mrs. Miller. That's worth taking a chance on someone Catherine loved." Sarah looked from Richard to Lily and back again, her analytical mind trying to find the trap, the manipulation, the inevitable betrayal. But all she saw was a grieving father offering a desperate mother the one thing she'd lost years ago, hope. "When would I start?" she heard herself ask. Richard's smile this time was genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. "Tomorrow. Dr. Harrison will arrange Lily's transfer to Children's Hospital tonight for initial tests. You can sleep in the guest room here rather than going back to that apartment. And tomorrow we'll discuss salary, benefits, and finding you proper housing." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Richard extended his hand. "Do we have a deal, Mrs. Miller?" Sarah hesitated one last moment, then took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up her arm. Their eyes met, and for just a second Sarah saw past the grief and power to the man underneath, someone who'd lost everything and was grasping at a chance to feel something again, just like she was. "We have a deal, Mr. Morgan." As their hands remained clasped a beat too long, Sarah felt the first stirring of something she'd thought died with her medical career, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, life could offer second chances after all. The morning sun, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, woke Sarah from the deepest sleep she'd had in 3 years. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too fine, the silence too complete. Then memory crashed back. Lily's diagnosis, Richard Morgan's impossible offer, falling asleep in a guest room that probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months. She bolted upright, panic flooding her system. "Lily, your daughter is fine," a calm female voice said from the doorway. A woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair and kind eyes stood there holding a cup of coffee. "She's in the kitchen having breakfast with Mr. Morgan. I'm Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper. Mr. Morgan asked me to bring you coffee and let you know, Doctor." Harrison called with good news. "Lily's initial tests show she's an excellent candidate for the new treatment protocol." Sarah took the coffee with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the surreal kindness of strangers. "Thank you. What time is it?" 8:30. "Mr. Morgan suggested you take your time getting ready. He's cleared his morning to spend with Lily and discuss your new position. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, courtesy of Mr. Morgan's assistant." Mrs. Patterson's expression turned sympathetic. "I know this is all very sudden, dear, but Mr. Morgan is a good man despite his gruff exterior. He really does want to help." After Mrs. Patterson left, Sarah explored the guest room more thoroughly. It was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soothing blues and greys, with an ensuite bathroom that featured a rainfall shower and heated floors. The closet held several professional outfits in exactly her size, tasteful but expensive, the kind of clothes she used to wear when she'd been Dr. Sarah Miller instead of Sarah the waitress. She showered quickly, marveling at water pressure that didn't sputter and die, then dressed in dark slacks and a cream blouse that made her look almost like her former self. The woman in the mirror was still too thin, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of years of exhaustion, but she stood straighter in these clothes, felt more like the person she used to be before everything fell apart. Voices and laughter guided her to the kitchen, an enormous space with marble countertops, top-of-the-line appliances, and Lily sitting at the island eating pancakes, while Richard Morgan stood at the stove making more. The domestic scene was so unexpected that Sarah stopped in the doorway, simply staring. "Mommy!" Lily squealed, syrup on her chin and joy in her eyes. "Mr. Richard makes the best pancakes ever, even better than yours." "High praise indeed," Sarah said dryly, catching Richard's amused glance. "I didn't know corporate billionaires knew how to cook." "Emily loved pancakes," Richard replied simply, flipping one with professional ease. "I learned to make them perfectly because she refused to eat them any other way. Some skills you don't forget." The grief flickered across his face briefly, before he masked it with a casual smile. "Hungry?" Sarah slid onto a stool next to Lily, hyper-aware of Richard's proximity as he plated pancakes for her. He'd traded yesterday's suit for jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look even more attractive. Less intimidating corporate titan, more approachable human being. "So," Richard said, leaning against the counter with his own coffee, "let's talk business. The Emily Morgan Foundation currently has an endowment of $50 million dedicated to researching pediatric lung diseases. We fund 12 research teams at various hospitals and universities across the country. We also provide financial assistance to families dealing with similar diagnoses, covering treatment costs that insurance won't." Sarah nearly choked on her pancake. 50 million. Modest by some foundation standards, but we're focused on quality over quantity. The problem is I'm a businessman, not a medical expert. I've been relying on advisors who may or may not have conflicts of interest, and I've personally reviewed 0 of the research proposals because I don't understand half the terminology. Richard's jaw tightened. I've thrown money at the problem without really knowing if it's making a difference. That ends now. You want me to evaluate the research proposals? Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. This was the kind of work she'd dreamed of doing before the malpractice suit destroyed her career. I want you to overhaul the entire foundation, Richard corrected. Review current projects, recommend which to continue funding and which to cut. Interview research teams personally. Set new criteria for grant applications. Build relationships with the medical community. You have the expertise I lack, Mrs. Miller. Use it. The opportunity was staggering. It was also terrifying. I don't have a license anymore, Sarah said quietly, aware of Lily listening. There are limits to what I can legally do. You don't need a license to evaluate research or manage a foundation. You need medical knowledge and passion for the cause, both of which you have in abundance. Richard's gaze held hers. I did my research last night. The malpractice suit against you was questionable at best. You were a resident working a 30-hour shift when you made a judgment call that might have saved a child's life. The family sued anyway when their son died, and the hospital threw you under the bus to protect themselves. Sarah's throat tightened. You know about that. I know the family later admitted their son had been suffering from an undiagnosed condition no one could have predicted. I know 3 senior physicians testified that you made the correct call under impossible circumstances. I know the hospital settled the suit for $2 million and suspended your license to avoid their own liability. Richard's voice turned cold. I also know that hospital's board of directors includes 2 men who owed money to my venture capital firm, which gives me significant leverage should I choose to use it. Don't. The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Mr. Morgan, but I don't want my career back because you threatened someone. If I ever practice medicine again, it needs to be because I earned that right, not because a billionaire bullied people into giving it to me. Something flickered in Richard's expression. Respect, maybe, or approval. Fair enough, for now focus on the foundation work. It's more than enough to keep you busy, and it pays $200,000 a year with full benefits including platinum health insurance that covers both you and Lily. 200. Sarah couldn't finish the sentence. That was more than she'd made as a resident, more than most attending physicians earned, certainly more than she'd dared dream of making again. That's too much. That's market rate for a qualified medical consultant managing a major foundation, Richard countered. I checked. Actually, some foundations pay their directors twice that, but I figured you'd object to anything higher. He was right, which was oddly irritating. Sarah didn't want to be predictable to this man who'd known her for less than 24 hours. When do I start? Today, if you're ready. My driver will take Lily to Children's Hospital for her scheduled tests. Mrs. Patterson will stay with her the entire time. You and I will go to the foundation offices in the financial district, and I'll introduce you to the current staff. This afternoon, we'll look at apartments in better neighborhoods that have heating and security, and schools where Lily can actually learn something. It was too fast, too overwhelming, too much change in too little time. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, to slow things down, to maintain some control over her life that seemed to be spiraling into Richard Morgan's capable hands. Then Lily coughed, just once, but enough to remind Sarah exactly why she couldn't afford pride or caution or the luxury of taking things slowly. Okay, Sarah said, watching Richard's expression shift from businessman to something warmer. We do this your way, Mr. Morgan, but I have conditions. Of course you do. His smile was genuine now, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that made her pulse stutter. Name them. First, I make all medical and research decisions for the foundation without interference. You can question my choices, but ultimately, I need autonomy to do my job properly. Agreed. Second, Lily comes first. Always. If she needs me during work hours, I leave immediately, no questions asked. Absolutely agreed. In fact, I'd question your priorities if you suggested anything else. Third, Sarah hesitated, knowing this one might be harder to sell. We keep this professional. You're my employer. I'm your employee. Nothing more. Richard's expression became unreadable. Why would you need to specify that, Mrs. Miller? Because you look at me like... Sarah trailed off, flustered by his direct gaze. Just because I need your help doesn't mean I'm interested in anything beyond a working relationship. Noted, Richard said coolly, but something in his tone suggested he'd heard what she didn't say, that she'd noticed how he looked at her, which meant she'd been looking at him too. Though for the record, I wasn't aware I was looking at you like anything except a qualified candidate for an important position. Liar, Sarah thought, but didn't say. They both knew there was something crackling between them, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge or act on. Grief and desperation and unexpected attraction made for a volatile combination. Good, Sarah said firmly, ignoring the disappointment that flickered through her chest. Then we understand each other. Perfectly. Richard turned to Lily, who'd been watching their exchange with the fascinated attention of a child who knew she was witnessing something important. Ready to go see some doctors, Lily? They're going to do some tests to make sure we're giving you the best medicine possible. Lily nodded solemnly, then surprised them both by reaching for Richard's hand. Will you visit me at the hospital? Mommy gets really scared around hospitals since what happened. She tries to hide it, but I can tell. Richard glanced at Sarah, who felt her cheeks burn. Of course her daughter had noticed. Lily noticed everything, saw through every brave face Sarah tried to maintain. I'll visit, Richard promised, and I'll make sure your mom has someone with her so she doesn't have to be scared alone. You're nice, Lily announced, with the straightforward honesty of children. Emily must have been really happy to have you as her daddy. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Sarah watched him absorb them, saw the flash of pain followed by something that might have been gratitude. I hope she was, he said quietly. I hope I was good enough for her. You made her pancakes, Lily said with perfect 6-year-old logic. That means you were the best daddy ever. As Mrs. Patterson arrived to collect Lily for the hospital trip, Sarah found herself standing alone in the kitchen with Richard Morgan, the man who'd somehow become her employer, her daughter's savior, and the first person in 3 years who looked at her and saw the doctor she used to be instead of the failure she'd become. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. I know I don't deserve this second chance. Stop. Richard's voice was firm. You made one mistake during impossible circumstances 3 years ago. That doesn't define you, Mrs. Miller. What defines you is how you've fought every day since to survive and protect your daughter. That's the person I'm hiring. That's the person Catherine loved. That's the person who might actually help us make a difference in this fight. Sarah felt tears threaten again, but blinked them back. You really believe that? I believe everyone deserves a second chance at the life they were supposed to have, Richard said, and the way he looked at her suggested he was talking about more than just her career. Let's go prove we're both right about you. As they left the penthouse together, heading toward a future neither of them could have predicted 24 hours ago, Sarah allowed herself the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe Richard Morgan was right. Maybe second chances were possible. Maybe she could reclaim the life she'd lost and help save children like Lily in the process. And maybe, despite her own rules about keeping things professional, she'd already started noticing that Richard Morgan's smile could light up a room, that his grief made him human instead of intimidating, and that the way he'd looked at Lily with such gentle protectiveness suggested there was a good man underneath the corporate exterior. But those were thoughts for later. Right now she had a foundation to transform and a daughter to save. The complicated feelings developing for her new boss would just have to wait. 3 months into her position at the Emily Morgan Foundation, Sarah stood before the board of directors, presenting research findings that could reshape their entire funding strategy. Richard sat at the head of the conference table, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, despite her professional composure. The past 12 weeks had transformed everything. Lily was thriving on treatment. They'd moved to an apartment with actual heating in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, and Sarah had rediscovered her passion for medicine that she thought was lost forever. She'd also developed strong feelings for Richard that violated every boundary she'd tried to establish from day one. The Henderson lab at Johns Hopkins shows the most promising results, Sarah explained, advancing her presentation slide. Their gene therapy approach has achieved a 78% success rate, significantly higher than current protocols. I recommend increasing their funding by 40%. Board member Gregory Walsh leaned forward, skepticism evident in his expression. What about Dr. Mitchell's Stanford team? We've funded them for 5 years. We owe sick children results, not loyalty to underperforming teams, Sarah replied firmly. Dr. Mitchell's research hasn't advanced in 3 years, despite millions in funding. We must redirect resources to more promising avenues. Easy to say when you haven't built those relationships, Gregory said with barely concealed disdain. Some of us remember when this foundation honored Emily's memory, not let inexperienced consultants play scientist. The room fell silent. Sarah felt her face flush with old insecurities before Richard's voice cut through the tension like steel. Dr. Miller isn't playing scientist, Gregory. She is a scientist who's reviewed every research proposal this foundation has funded and identified exactly why we've made so little progress. Richard's tone was ice cold. Her recommendations are based on data and medical expertise, not golf course relationships. If you have specific concerns about her analysis, present them. Otherwise, let the expert do her job. Gregory's face reddened, but he remained silent. Sarah should have felt vindicated, but instead she felt uncomfortable with the protective fury in Richard's voice. They'd been so careful to maintain distance, cordial but never alone, never acknowledging the attraction between them. But everyone had noticed. Sarah saw it in exchanged glances, heard it in whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Richard's interest wasn't purely professional, and the entire board knew it. The meeting concluded with approval of her recommendations, but tension lingered. After board members filed out, Richard approached as the room emptied. "You didn't have to defend me like that," Sarah said quietly. He was out of line. He expressed legitimate concerns. "You made it personal." Sarah met his eyes. "People are talking, Richard, about us, about why you hired me, and whether my recommendations are based on research or other factors. That's absurd. Your work speaks for itself. Does it? Or does it look like a grieving widower hired an attractive woman and now makes decisions to impress her rather than what's best for the foundation?" The words came out harsher than intended. "From my boss, who shows up at galas with his ex-girlfriend while people whisper about whether I slept my way into this job." Richard's jaw tightened. "Is that what you think? That I hired you because I found you attractive? I think you need to be more careful about defending me. I think you need professional distance so my work isn't questioned. And I think we both need to acknowledge there's something here that has nothing to do with the foundation, and it's going to become a problem if we don't address it." "There's nothing to address," Richard said flatly. "You're an employee. I'm your employer. That's all." The words shouldn't have hurt. They were what Sarah had insisted on 3 months ago, but they did hurt, sliding between her ribs like cold steel, because they were a lie and they both knew it. The late nights when their hands accidentally touched, the way Richard always visited the hospital during Lily's appointments, the moments their eyes met across tables and something electric passed between them. "Fine," Sarah matched his tone. "Then I'll submit recommendations through formal channels from now on. No more private strategy sessions, no more hospital visits together, no more anything that could be misinterpreted." "Sarah, Dr. Miller," she corrected sharply. "In professional settings, use my title. As you said, I'm an employee and you're my employer. Let's keep it that way." She walked out before he could respond, heart hammering and tears threatening. This was what she'd wanted: clear boundaries, professional distance. So why did it feel like she'd just lost something precious? 3 hours later at Children's Hospital for Lily's checkup, Vivian Thornton waited outside the treatment room. Richard's ex-girlfriend had been appearing at foundation events for weeks, always touching his arm and reminding everyone she'd been part of his life before Sarah's arrangement. "Dr. Miller," Vivian said with a cold smile. "What a coincidence." It wasn't a coincidence. Vivian was a corporate lawyer who dated Richard after Catherine's death, and she clearly hadn't accepted their breakup. "Mrs. Thornton," Sarah replied coolly, moving toward the treatment room. "Excuse me, I wanted to talk about Richard." Vivian blocked her path. "We've been rekindling things recently. I think it's important you understand before you get inappropriate ideas about your position in his life." Sarah's blood ran cold. "I have no inappropriate ideas about Mr. Morgan. Don't you? Everyone's noticed how he looks at you, how defensive he gets when anyone questions your recommendations. It's almost sweet how he's using you as a distraction from grief. But Richard and I have history, Dr. Miller. Real history. Not some pity hire because your daughter broke into his dead child's bedroom." The casual cruelty took Sarah's breath away. Before she could respond, Mrs. Patterson appeared, her kind face tight with disapproval. "Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Morgan made it clear last week you're not welcome at locations involving Lily's care," the housekeeper said firmly. "He was very specific after you made scenes at the foundation office." Vivian's composure cracked. "Richard is confused. Once he works through his grief properly, he'll remember what we had. Tell him I'll be at the Symphony Gala next Friday. We can discuss our future then." She swept away, leaving Sarah shaking. Mrs. Patterson touched her arm gently. "Don't listen to that woman, dear. She's been trying to sink her claws into Mr. Morgan for 2 years. He's made it clear he's not interested. The only person he looks at with real emotion is you." "That's the problem," Sarah whispered. "We can't let this become something it shouldn't be. Lily's treatment depends on this job, on professional boundaries, on not letting personal feelings complicate everything. Sometimes personal feelings are exactly what's needed," Mrs. Patterson said cryptically. "Mr. Morgan has been existing, not living, since Emily died. You and Lily have given him a reason to feel again. That's worth more than any professional boundary." That night, reviewing research proposals while Lily slept peacefully, Sarah couldn't shake Vivian's words. What if Richard was using her as a distraction? What if the board was right to question her position? What if she was reading too much into professional courtesy? Her phone buzzed. "Need to talk about today. Can we meet tomorrow morning before the office?" Sarah stared at the message. This was the moment to establish boundaries, to protect herself and Lily from hoping for something that couldn't exist between a waitress and a billionaire whose ex-girlfriend was a polished lawyer. She typed, "I think it's better if we keep communications professional and through proper channels. See you at Monday's staff meeting." The response came immediately. "Sarah, please, this isn't about work." Her heart clenched, but she forced herself to type, "Then it's not appropriate for us to discuss. Good night, Mr. Morgan." She turned off her phone before seeing his response, before giving in to the desperate urge to drive to his penthouse and tell him everything, that she'd been falling for him since he'd made pancakes for Lily, that his smile made her feel alive again, that the way he looked at her made her believe in second chances. But fairy tales didn't happen to women who'd lost medical licenses and cleaned toilets. Fairy tales didn't involve foundation directors falling for billionaire bosses, while ex-girlfriends circled and board members questioned decisions. Fairy tales were for other people who hadn't already failed spectacularly at building the life they wanted. What Sarah didn't know was that Richard sat in his penthouse, staring at her message with devastating clarity. He'd been about to tell her that Vivian had made threats, that board members questioning Sarah were investors in Dr. Mitchell's research who stood to lose money, that he'd spent 3 months falling in love with a woman who'd made him remember what wanting a future felt like. But Sarah's message was clear. She wanted professional boundaries and distance, wanted to pretend the connection didn't exist, wanted to protect herself from pain, even if it meant missing joy. Richard understood that instinct. He'd been doing the same thing for 2 years, protecting himself from feeling because feeling meant risking loss again. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe they should keep things professional and safe. Or maybe they were both cowards making the biggest mistake of their lives. 3 weeks later, the Symphony Gala arrived with all the artificial glamour and pretense Sarah hated about high society. Designer dresses costing more than monthly rent, artificial polite conversations filled with empty pleasantries, and constant awareness she didn't belong. But as foundation director, attending was technically required. The fact that Vivian Thornton would be there with Richard as her date was irrelevant. Sarah had made her choice. Professional distance, clear boundaries. The crushing loneliness she'd felt was just an adjustment period. Eventually, she'd stop thinking about Richard's smile, stop replaying conversations, stop wondering what might have happened if she'd been brave enough to admit her feelings. "You look beautiful, Mummy," Lily said as Sarah zipped her simple black dress. "Like a princess." "Princesses wear tiaras, baby. I'm wearing bobby pins and hope." "Mr. Richard will think you're beautiful too," Lily said with 6-year-old certainty. "He always smiles different when he sees you." "Mr. Morgan," Sarah corrected, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "And he smiles the same at everyone." "Nuh-uh. His eyes get sparkly with you, out of the mouths of babes." Sarah kissed Lily's forehead, grateful her daughter's treatment was progressing so well. That was what mattered. Lily's health, the incredible opportunity Richard had given them. Romance was a luxury they couldn't afford. Symphony Hall was magnificent, dripping with crystal chandeliers and Boston's elite. Sarah spotted Richard immediately. Impossible not to when he commanded every room, tall and devastating in a tuxedo, silver touching his temples. Vivian Thornton stood beside him in scarlet, her hand possessively on his arm as she laughed. They looked perfect together, matched in wealth, sophistication, belonging to the same world of galas and summer homes. Sarah's heart cracked a little more. "Dr. Miller," Gregory Walsh appeared, his earlier hostility replaced by respect. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior last month. Your recommendations about Hopkins were absolutely correct. Their latest results are extraordinary. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I also wanted to warn you. Gregory glanced around. Doctor, Mitchell from Stanford has been calling board members, suggesting your evaluation was biased because of your personal relationship with Mr. Morgan. He's claiming you're not qualified and manipulating Mr. Morgan's grief. He's threatening to sue for breach of contract and suggesting to reporters there's a scandal involving foundation money and inappropriate relationships. Sarah felt sick. That's not true. My recommendations were based entirely on research data. I know, but Mitchell is friends with board members and people are watching, Dr. Miller. One wrong move and this situation could explode in ways that hurt the foundation, Lily's treatment access, and both your reputations. Before Sarah could respond, Richard appeared. Gregory, Dr. Miller, enjoying the evening? Mr. Morgan, Sarah said formally, aware of Vivian watching. I was discussing the Foundation's research evaluation with Mr. Walsh. Could I borrow you for a moment? Richard's voice was neutral, but his eyes held storms. There's someone I'd like you to meet regarding potential collaboration. It was transparent, an excuse to get her alone. Sarah should refuse, maintain distance. But Gregory's warning echoed, and she needed to understand the threats they faced. Richard led her to a quiet alcove away from the reception. This close, she could smell his cologne, see tension in his shoulders, feel the electricity between them. You're avoiding me, Richard said without preamble. I'm maintaining appropriate boundaries. You're hiding. His voice roughened with frustration. 3 weeks of only emails and formal meetings. You've stopped bringing Lily during hospital appointments. You've restructured your schedule to ensure we're never alone. That's not professional boundaries, Sarah. That's running away. From what? She challenged, anger flaring. From my boss who shows up at galas with his ex-girlfriend, while people whisper about whether I slept my way into my job. From a position I've worked hard to earn that's being undermined by rumors. From feelings that can only end in disaster. You think I'm here with Vivian? Richard stepped closer. She ambushed me at the entrance. I've spent an hour trying to extract myself, while she tells everyone we're rekindling our relationship. I came alone, Sarah. I came hoping to see you and finally have an honest conversation. Nothing is happening between us, Sarah said desperately, heart screaming the opposite. Nothing can happen, Dr. Mitchell is threatening to sue. Board members are questioning my qualifications. Reporters are asking about scandals. If there's even a hint of impropriety, everything falls apart. The foundation, my position, possibly Lily's treatment. So we sacrifice what we feel to protect from potential problems. We sacrifice what we feel to protect what matters most. Sarah's voice cracked. I'm not Catherine. I'm not your social equal, not from your world, not someone you can build a life with without everyone questioning your judgment. I'm the charity case you hired out of guilt, and the moment we act on this, that's all I'll ever be. The poor woman who seduced her grieving boss for money. The words hung between them, brutal and honest. Richard's face went carefully blank. Is that what you think? He asked quietly. That helping you was about guilt. That what I feel is grief-induced delusion. I think you're lonely and I'm convenient. You see Lily and remember Emily, see me and remember Catherine, and you've built a fantasy where saving us redeems losing them. But I'm not a redemption arc, Richard. I'm a real person with a daughter who depends on this job. I can't risk everything on feelings that might just be nostalgia and loneliness. You're wrong. Richard's voice was steel-edged, anger breaking through. Wrong about my motivations. Wrong about why I hired you. Wrong about what you mean to me. But you're right about one thing. You're not Catherine. Catherine never ran from difficult emotions. Catherine never let fear decide her choices. Catherine fought for what she wanted even when it was hard. The comparison stung worse than any accusation. Before Sarah could respond, Vivian's voice cut through the alcove. There you are, darling. They're starting the auction and I need you to bid on that sculpture. Vivian's eyes swept over Sarah with cold dismissal. Dr. Miller, how lovely. I didn't realize foundation employees were invited to events like this. Dr. Miller is the foundation director, Richard said tightly, and we were having a private conversation. About what? Managing charities? Vivian's smile was poisonous. Or more personal matters. I should warn you, Dr. Miller, Richard has always mixed business with pleasure, especially with women in vulnerable positions who mistake professional kindness for something significant. That's enough, Vivian. Is it? Because I've heard interesting rumors about questionable foundation expenditures, about research decisions that don't make sense, about a director with a suspicious background and conveniently sick daughter. It would be a shame if those rumors reached the Attorney General's office that investigates charitable fraud. The threat was clear. Vivian wasn't just a jealous ex. She was a lawyer willing to destroy Sarah's reputation and possibly her freedom. "You're threatening her," Richard said, voice dangerously quiet. "I'm protecting you from a colossal mistake," Vivian countered. "This woman is using you." She saw an opportunity. A grieving widower with money and guilt, a sick daughter needing treatment, a convenient connection to your dead wife. She's playing you, and you're too blinded by loneliness to see it. Sarah felt the room spin. Every fear, every worst-case scenario was being voiced by someone with power to make them reality. "Get out," Richard said to Vivian, tone absolute. "Get out now, or I'll have security remove you." "Richard," I said, "get out." He turned to Sarah, eyes blazing. "Don't listen to her. None of what she said is true." But Sarah was backing away, the full weight crushing down. "She's right about one thing. I'm not from your world and never will be. Every time someone like Vivian looks at me, they'll see what she sees. The poor woman who trapped a billionaire through grief. The scandal waiting to happen. Sarah, don't. I can't lose this job. I can't lose Lily's treatment. I can't risk everything on feelings that might destroy us both." Tears spilled over. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I can't be what you need." She ran before he could respond, fled through glittering crowds into cold Boston night. Behind her, Richard called her name, but she didn't stop, because if she turned around, if she saw pain in his eyes, she'd give in. She'd risk everything for happiness, and when it fell apart, when reality crashed into fantasy, Lily would pay the price. What Sarah didn't know was that Richard stood in that alcove watching her disappear and made a decision. He'd spent 2 years protecting himself from feeling, from risking, from living. He'd let fear and grief dictate choices, had hidden behind boundaries because it was safe. But Sarah wasn't safe. She was terrifying and complicated and brave enough to sacrifice her happiness for her daughter. She was everything Catherine said she'd be, brilliant, compassionate, stronger than she knew, and Richard was done being safe, done letting fear win, done watching people he cared about walk away because he was too careful to fight. If Sarah thought Vivian's threats would scare him, she was about to learn how ruthlessly a billionaire could fight when he found something worth fighting for. Sarah spent 3 days avoiding Richard's calls, burying herself in research and Lily's medical care, pretending her heart wasn't breaking. On the 4th day, Gregory Walsh appeared at her apartment with a folder and a serious expression. "Emergency board meeting. Mr. Morgan specifically requested your attendance there. It's not optional, Dr. Miller." The conference room fell silent when she entered. Every board member was present, along with strangers, a lawyer, a federal official, and Richard with fierce determination. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Miller," Richard said formally. Gregory pushed the folder across. "Read this. Documents detailed fraud by Dr. Mitchell's Stanford team. Falsified data, misappropriated funds. You investigated him." Sarah looked at Richard. "When Mitchell threatened legal action, I hired investigators. We found systematic fraud spanning 5 years. I'm Assistant Attorney General David Chen. Dr. Mitchell is being arrested on federal charges. His lawsuit is withdrawn. Your recommendations prevented Foundation complicity in major fraud," Gregory said with respect. "Your expertise saved this foundation," Richard added quietly. "I'm Jennifer Hart, Mr. Morgan's attorney. We've prepared a response to Vivian Thornton's threats. She's been calling reporters suggesting impropriety. We've documented harassment and defamation. She's been served with a cease and desist." "Why?" Sarah whispered. "Because this foundation matters," Richard said. "Emily's legacy matters. Finding treatments that save children matters. I wasn't letting corrupt researchers or vindictive ex-girlfriends destroy what we're building. You've transformed this foundation. The board voted to make you permanent director with full authority, unanimously." "There's one more thing," Richard said. "I'm stepping down as board chair." "Why?" "Because I can't be your boss and be what I want to be to you. You were right about power imbalance. Gregory will take over as board chair. I'll remain on the board in advisory capacity, but I'll have no authority over your position. Richard, I'm choosing to make room for something more important." He pulled out a small box. "The board agreed to stay for this because I want witnesses. This isn't some secret relationship built on power dynamics. This is me, Richard Morgan, as just a man given a second chance by an extraordinary woman." Richard dropped to one knee. He opened the box, revealing a ring, beautiful but not ostentatious. "Sarah Miller, you've taught me how to live again. You've shown me that grief doesn't have to be the end, that second chances are real, that love doesn't diminish because we've loved before. Lily brought light back into Emily's room, and you brought light back into my life. I'm not asking you to be Catherine's replacement. I'm asking you to build a new world with me, where we're partners in everything, where your daughter and mine can be sisters in memory, where we can save children and give other families the happy endings we've found. This is crazy, Sarah breathed, tears streaming. Completely crazy. Also completely real. I love you, Sarah. I love your brilliant mind and fierce heart. I love how you've rebuilt your life from nothing and never lost your compassion. I love watching you with Lily, seeing you present research, listening to you talk about medicine like poetry. And yes, I love that you sometimes look at me like you can't believe I'm real, because I look at you the same way every day. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. But I don't want to figure it out alone. I don't want to wake up 5 years from now and regret that I let fear keep me from the best thing that ever happened to me besides Emily. Say yes, Gregory urged. For God's sake, put the man out of his misery. Say yes, so we can stop pretending we haven't noticed the way you two look at each other. Say yes so Lily can have a father who adores her. Sarah laughed through tears. You all planned this. We may have been consulted about timing. Mr. Morgan wanted the Mitchell situation resolved first. He wanted to propose from a place of equals. I'm terrified, she confessed. Terrified of losing this, of waking up and finding it was too good to be true. I'm terrified too, but I'm more terrified of not taking this chance, of letting you walk away because we're both too scared to be happy. He held out the ring. So what do you say, Dr. Miller? Will you marry me and let me prove that sometimes fairy tales do happen to people who've already survived their worst nightmares? I have conditions. Of course you do. Name them. First, we tell Lily together. Tonight. Agreed. Second, I keep working at the foundation. I'm not giving up my career. Absolutely non-negotiable. Third, you have to promise we'll always be honest about grief, about Emily and Catherine and how they'll always be part of our story. Richard stood, taking her hands. I promise Emily will always be my daughter, and Catherine will always be the reason I found you. I promise we'll honor their memory by building something beautiful from grief. And I promise I will show you every single day that you're not a replacement. You're the woman I'm choosing to love for exactly who you are. Then yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build a life with you. Yes, I'll believe in impossible things like second chances and happy endings that start in dead daughters' bedrooms. Richard slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that made the board members applaud. So, Gregory said cheerfully, can we discuss the Hopkins research expansion? Some of us have actual work to do. That evening, they told Lily. She took one look at their joined hands and started bouncing. You're getting married, I knew it. How do you feel about that? Sarah asked. About Mr. Richard becoming part of our family. Lily threw her arms around Richard's neck. Can I call you Daddy? My real daddy left before I was born, but you're here, and you make Mommy smile and you make the best pancakes, and Emily would want you to be happy again. I would be honored if you called me Daddy. And yes, Emily would be happy. She'd love you very much. Can we go to her room now? I want to tell her about the wedding. They walked to Richard's penthouse, where Emily's room remained exactly as Lily first saw it. But now it felt like a bridge between past and future, between the daughter who'd died and the daughter who'd survived. Lily climbed onto Emily's bed and started chattering to the unicorn about wedding dresses and flower girls. Sarah watched with Richard's arm around her waist, both crying quietly. Thank you, Richard whispered, for breaking into my house, for being stubborn and brilliant and brave enough to let yourself be happy. Thank you for not calling the police when you found a random child in your dead daughter's bed, and for being crazy enough to fight for us, even when I was too scared. They watched Lily transform grief into joy through pure magic of a child's acceptance, and Sarah finally let herself believe it was real. Second chances were real. Love could bloom from grief, and sometimes the best endings started with a little girl looking for warmth and finding a home. 2 years later, the Emily and Catherine Morgan Foundation's gala celebrated their latest milestone, FDA approval for Hopkins gene therapy treatment, with 92% success rate. Lily stood on stage beside Richard and Sarah, healthy and radiant, reading about being a survivor and fighter. Gregory Walsh cried while his husband held his hand. Vivian Thornton was absent. She'd moved to California after her legal career suffered. Dr. Mitchell was serving 5 years in federal prison. But mostly, the gala celebrated life, the 247 children who'd received treatment through foundation grants, and were alive because Richard and Sarah refused to let grief and fear win, because a desperate mother let her daughter seek warmth in a stranger's home, because a grieving father chose to see possibility instead of intrusion. After speeches and awards, Sarah found Richard on the balcony overlooking Boston. He pulled her into his arms. "Emily would have loved this," he said softly. "She would have loved Lily, loved you, loved seeing her room become a place of hope. Catherine would have too. She always said you needed someone who'd challenge you. I like to think she orchestrated this whole thing, just laughing at how long it took us." "Probably." Richard turned Sarah to face him. "I have a surprise. If it's another research grant, better." He pulled a document from his pocket. "The medical board reinstated your license. Full privileges, no restrictions. You can practice again." Sarah stared at the paper. "How?" "The hospital's legal team committed fraud in settlement documentation. Jennifer found the evidence. The board agreed the suspension was unjust." Richard smiled. "You don't have to use it, but you earned the right to choose." Sarah looked from the document to Richard to the city spread below, thinking about the journey from desperate waitress to foundation director to licensed physician again, about Lily healthy and happy inside, about building a life from nothing and finding everything. "I choose both. Foundation work and medical practice, research and patient care. I choose all of it, including you and Lily and this impossible second chance we've built together." Richard kissed her as Boston sparkled below, and somewhere in the universe, Sarah imagined Emily and Catherine smiling at the family born from their legacy. Sometimes the best stories started with an unexpected guest. Sometimes love required breaking in where you didn't belong, and sometimes the happy ending was worth every moment of fear, doubt, and impossible hope that brought you there.